Hey folks, Michael here again with the CCERP podcast, Cypress Creek Ecological Restoration Project. We're back again for episode number, 13 or something like that? I forget. Close enough. But main thing is a guest. So today, we're here talking to longtime resident involved in the community and improving it, Jim Robertson. Jim, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, this is Jim Robertson. Lived in the area about 31 years now, resident of Lakewood Forest.
Cool. And what's your background in all the stuff that you do?
Okay. Yes, I actually grew up in the Midwest in Ohio and went to school in Ohio and the graduate school on the East Coast at Columbia.
Cool.
But we've lived on the East Coast, the Gulf Coast, the West Coast, and other places through the years. But I actually did my undergraduate work in geology and then graduate work in marine geology. And
cool.
Following that, I went to work in the oil and gas industry, and so geologist by both education and career or profession, and retired and was living in here at the time I retired. But while I was working, really didn't have that much time to do much outside and around, but I was aware of some of the things in this area. And when I retired, got more interested in the immediate area, and I'd always explored, and I got the opportunity to explore more along Cypress Creek and realized that we really have a wonderful amenity right here in our backyard.
Yeah. Did you do some hiking or boating or something when you were younger?
When I was younger, I've always enjoyed hiking. As a geologist, I've always enjoyed the outdoors, and that's one of the things that attracted me to that profession. But in this area, I realized that we have wonderful areas along Cypress Creek that are really nice for hiking, and so I started doing more and more of that in our entire lives with my wife and family. National park visitation and hiking has been the primary outside recreation thing that we've done. I've done boating, done skiing, paddling, things like that, but always enjoyed hiking the most, really.
What's the longest hike you've been on?
I guess 14 miles a day is about the max that I've ever done. I've done some hikes, and I don't even remember the mileage, just many years ago, 2 or 3 nights in the Adirondacks, and also some places in the West. But when we had our children younger, we did a lot of car camping at that time, and then we do short day hikes mostly, didn't do much extended hiking with them. I've also, as far as outdoor, I've gone down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon several times. So
cool. Nice.
Outdoor activity has always been at the top of my list.
Cool. What about height? Have you climbed some mountains?
I guess I haven't been one of those trying to chase the 14ers or anything like that in the Rockies. Hiked up Mount Washington and hiked some of the smaller peaks in the Rockies, but again, mostly day hikes, not so much long extended hikes.
What's the favorite places you've been to in terms of geology?
It's hard to say. As a geologist, that has always been something that's kind of in the back of my mind when we would visit parks and things like that. But Yosemite is certainly at the top of our list. Been to Alaska a couple times. I've also the Smoky Mountains, Glacier National Park, the Canadian Rockies. But the thing that I guess I like about them is that they're all spectacular, but they're all different, as far as the scenery and geology.
Yeah.
So there's not a single favorite. I've got favorite things in each one of them, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. When I go places, I much prefer Mountainous regions than the beach. Some people like the ocean a lot, and it's just too, for me and what I want to do and my taste, too monotone and boring and the same. I like the excitement and the variation of the mountains.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I mean, we've done things at the ocean as well, but given the choice of the two, I greatly favor the mountains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exciting. Always makes me feel good. Gives me a thrill, and it's interesting. But whereas at the beach, I just wonder if I'm going to be eaten by a shark or stung by a jellyfish. Yeah. You can't see anything. It sneaks up on you. At least in the mountains, you got a chance.
Yeah.
But what's the longest hike you've been to around here?
I probably just 3 or 4 or 5 miles, something like that. When I get out during the week, I try to get out, and when I walk, my daily walks are hopefully daily walks, but I try to do between 3 and 4 miles whenever I get out.
Wow, nice. Awesome. But yeah, there's some people who run around here, and I know some folks in a local running group. I'm in the group on Facebook, and they do different distances, but around here, sometimes they'll do 3, 6, 12, 20. They've found ways to wind here and there and do some kind of longer runs. I don't think they have anything around here like they do when they go to some races, because some of these folks, they'll do 50-mile runs and 100-mile runs and stuff like that. And
the trails around here, the connectivity is still developing, but there are places where you can go 3 or 4 miles just on the continuous section along Cypress Creek. Certainly, along Spring Creek up to the north, there's a 13 and a half mile paved trail, and then on the north side, Montgomery County, there's about a 13-mile natural surface trail. So,
cool.
They've been able to put longer segments together up there. We're still working on that here, and it's coming together. It'll happen. It's taken a while.
Yeah.
But we will have those same options here in the hopefully not too distant future.
Cool. Yeah, nice. Yeah, it'd be nice if the culture would have developed differently through history, but and people would have known more about ecology and the human need for movement. But people don't know what they don't know. But if they would have known better, it'd be nice to have. We'd have more wildlife corridors, but it'd be nice to have more kind of human corridors too. Because I wish I could travel without violating someone's private property rights and just travel 10 or 20 miles one way up the creek, 10 or 20 miles the other way, have some natural forested areas to move in, but that's just not an option here, unfortunately, right now.
Yeah, it's been kind of interesting. Now, I know my wife and I went to Europe in, I think it was 1974, a long time ago. But one thing that really struck me when we were over there, I became aware of these long hiking trails that they had. And, in the United States at that time, we had the Appalachian Trail and Pacific Crest Trail and things like that. But just all over the countryside in Europe were these connected hiking trails that just you go about anywhere on them. And I thought it was just really struck me how unique it was, and we didn't have something like that in the United States. But what I have seen, in particularly the last 20 years or so, is just a tremendous efforts underway in different parts of the U.S. to create a system of trails. And I don't know what it is about the evolution of this country, the development of this country. It's taken us a while to figure that out, but I am really encouraged with what's happening. I mean, I say I grew up in eastern Ohio, and there's a wonderful trail system there that exists and is being expanded and developed following the old towpaths along the canal system. And, I played along these canals when I was a kid, never thought about it. You could see the old towpaths and things, but now a lot of those are being put into trail systems that are tens of miles long or even longer.
Good.
So we seem to be late in this country coming around to that, but I'm encouraged with what we are seeing.
Yeah, it'd be nice if you could go. We get to a time where Americans could go to an airport in Europe and Europeans could no longer tell right away by physical characteristics that it was an American. And of course, if folks wonder what I'm referring to, I mean like the average weight of Americans, unfortunately, because of the culture we're in, the diet, food we eat, lack of physical activity, some things like that. Not good for us, unfortunately.
No, it's not.
Yeah. And one thing I've heard, I got to look into more, it might be, I don't know if it's like in England somewhere, but I think it's more like Norway or around there. I think some countries, they have laws so that, again, I got to look at the context and see exactly what they say, but from what I've heard a little bit is that you can walk anywhere you want to as long as you don't mess with someone's property and like don't take too much, don't forage too much or something like that. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. Don't know what all the rules are, but maybe you can't hunt. Maybe you can forage a little bit. You can stay, maybe stay a little bit, or maybe you have to pass through. But it's some laws that allow more human access and transit across private property.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that myself, Michael, but I am aware that certainly in parts of Europe and maybe even in the British Isles, there is law in effect that you can go across private property. Now, I don't know if it's on those established trails or not, but they don't have large government tracts like we do, particularly in the West and things like that. But yet they have these trail systems that are largely on private property, and I don't think that private folks can shut those trails off. Now, I don't know if you just go wander all over somebody's property, but
yeah, right.
But at least on the trail systems, it's largely on private property, and that is legal access to those trails.
Interesting. Yeah. But what have you noticed in our area, like how it's changed through the years since you've been here?
Yeah, as I say, we've been here just over 31 years, and it has developed significantly. We're at the west side of Lakewood Forest, and that was kind of the edge of things. Largely at that time, there's been tremendous growth and expansion. However, it's been kind of interesting because even though there were some, and still are, some undeveloped tracts along Cypress Creek from the time I came here, and then through the years have noticed that even though this area, essentially west or east of US 290, is heavily developed, even through that developed area, the Cypress Creek corridor is kind of a unique corridor in that there are large undeveloped pieces along Cypress Creek. And so the thing that has struck me, and I think is a really wonderful thing about Cypress Creek, is the Cypress Creek corridor is it's not entirely natural, but largely natural, undeveloped corridor right through the heart of a heavily developed area. Now, as you get further west of 290, out toward Bridgeland and Fairfield and out in that area, along Cypress and Little Cypress Creek, it's less developed and is becoming more developed. But through this area, I think we do have something really unique in the sense that we do have the Cypress Creek corridor through a relatively heavily developed area. And the thing I have seen through the years, and that's why I actually got interested in trying to preserve the corridor along Cypress Creek, was that I just saw more and more wooded tracts that were being cleared for development. You see a wooded tract and be cleared very rapidly, and a drugstore go up, something like that, and
then it goes out of business.
And so I actually started approaching some of the developers and some of the companies, about trying to preserve at least a wooded buffer between their store and the highway, and that was really a challenge. But then I realized that because of the flooding nature of Cypress Creek and the fact that it's still largely undeveloped at that time, I had a better chance of maybe trying to do something along Cypress Creek to preserve that forested corridor than trying to preserve a tract at the corner of a major intersection.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of shifted focus and started focusing on trying to preserve things in the Cypress Creek corridor.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think part of the problem is just that idea of development. People think, oh, it's like that. Even though nature has spent thousands of years developing it, and as good as it is, and it has important benefits to us, unfortunately, some people think if it's not destroyed in a building laid down, then it's not quote unquote developed. There's some thinking I think that should be done around that to put more wisdom and context into what we mean by development. But,
yeah, the approach that we've always taken, whether it's relative to flooding or development, is to try to look at what I've always called a balanced approach.
mm-hmm.
In a large metropolitan area like this, development is going to occur. I acknowledge and recognize that, but what we've tried to do is to work with MUDs, with developers, with HOAs, with whomever we can to look at it from a balanced approach. Particularly with the developers, they're trying to develop something. Well, is there some way we can preserve a piece of it, or work with them to ensure that what they're doing would be more of a balanced approach rather than just a complete clear and level the area and then come back and maybe plant some trees or completely pave it over.
Yeah. Yeah, and then from another perspective, it's like you can't control what you can't control. Some things are going to happen regardless, but you can at least try to mollify things a little bit, make things a little better in context of kind of what's out of your hands and what you can't control. That too.
Yeah, with the Cypress Creek Greenway Project, we are not building trails. We're not buying acreage ourselves. We're not building parks ourselves. But in the Greenway effort, what we've tried to do or have done is to provide a vision and then be an advocacy and a coordinating entity to work with others. We've approached numerous developers, home builders, commercial folks, mud districts, precinct 3 and 4, parks departments, whomever, individual landowners. But we've always approached them from the standpoint of trying to make them aware of what we do have, the uniqueness of it, and hopefully they can see the benefits of working with us or working with others to preserve at least a portion of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we've tried to take an approach where we try to work with them rather than I guess against them.
Yeah, rather than making it all antagonistic.
Yeah, we don't have the resources to take legal recourse that some folks do and others. But
yeah.
Overall, I think we've been fairly successful in working with folks.
Have you noticed like a change through the decades in like the deer population or rabbit population or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot fewer deer in the area.
Too bad.
They are still here. I know before I retired, we moved out here before Eldridge Parkway was completed to the south of Grant Road.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that was opened up, it was essentially a wooded corridor on both sides with the exception of Barwood down to the south, but wooded corridor on both sides all the way down to Cypress, North Houston, and then even further down south as you got down toward 1960, it was a wooded corridor there. And, it was common to see deer in the mornings when I would go to work and things along North Eldridge after it was opened up. But, they came in and subdivisions were developed, areas were cleared, and then, you would see deer hit along the road. I mean, deer carcasses along the road. And it's rare that I see deer on North Eldridge now. They're still there. I do know because I do walk in the area. I see deer signs, and then they're definitely still in the area, but not nearly as abundant as they have been in the past.
Yeah.
probably true for rabbits and possums and other things as well. But that's something I do see. I just, within the last couple of weeks around the holidays, I was walking one of the wooded tracks out here and saw 2 deer. And
cool.
So they're still in the area, but definitely not in the numbers that they were. I've actually never seen coyotes in this area, but I've heard them. So,
yeah.
But I don't hear them as much anymore, or haven't heard one for a long time. But with the efforts along Cypress Creek, one of the things that we've tried to do is to have a corridor preserved along the creek, not just pieces here and there. So you have that corridor where wildlife can exist and move up and down the corridor, and not just be limited to some one piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah, because we need things like that. The hawks, owls, bobcat, coyote to help control the rodent population. Mice, rats, squirrels, stuff that can carry disease.
Yeah.
Very important ecologically for our own health.
Get into that balance again.
Yeah. Control Lyme disease, and of course plagues were spread by rats, not by snakes or coyotes.
One thing that we're fortunate, knock on wood, that I don't see a lot of in the Cypress Creek corridor. I rarely see any evidence of feral hogs.
Yeah, true, right.
There are some areas further down, you go far up on the creek, you may see it, and even down in some of the large tracts further downstream, close to Spring Creek. But through most of the corridor of Cypress Creek, you don't see a lot of feral hog activity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're getting to be a problem. Invasive species.
Yes.
But so, what are you're involved in 2 projects, the Greenway Project and Cypress Creek Flood Control Coalition?
Yeah, just a little background or history on that. I have always enjoyed this area. One of the reasons we located out here when we did was we liked the wooded nature area, the forested acreage, and the subdivisions were developed, with preserving trees within those areas. So we've always liked this area. And then about the time I retired, I started looking at the area, and I enjoyed walking, and having seen these areas getting cleared more and more, I thought, geez, we need to try to do something to preserve these areas. And so I got interested, and just kind of really as an individual, came up with the effort to try to preserve some of the areas. And initially I was just looking from Grantwood, right at Grant Road and Cypress Creek, up to Eldridge, because there was early effort to, many years ago, that acreage near Cypress Creek in North Eldridge was purchased actually for a future park development, but it had never been developed. But and just the idea of a connection between Grantwood, which was a buyout area at that time, they were starting to buy homes out in there, and I thought, well, maybe that could be a park sometime. And then North Eldridge, if they get a park there, and just have a connection along Cypress Creek, and realized that the Greenway could be something we could do. But then as I got more involved with it, I realized that it doesn't have to be just that mile or so there, that we got potential all along Cypress Creek. And so I actually went and met with Dick Smith, who was president of the Cypress Creek Flood Control Coalition. I had read about their annual meeting in one of the papers, local papers, and so I went to their annual meeting and was kind of aware of what they did. But then when I sat down with Dick Smith, realized that when the Cypress Creek Flood Control Coalition was formed in 1999, they were focused on flood mitigation. They also wanted to look at preservation of the corridor along Cypress Creek. That helps with flood mitigation, but then it also provides recreational opportunities, provides habitat. And the third area they were focusing on was education and communication with the community. A voice for the community, really, in those 3 areas. But it became apparent that I was focusing right on that second thing that they were thinking about, that preservation along Cypress Creek. So I essentially started working with them and became chairman of the Cypress Creek Greenway Project, which is really a committee within the Cypress Creek Flood Control Coalition.
Hmm.
Coalition's major focus in most of our efforts, I mean, the vast majority of our efforts are actually on flood mitigation within the entire Cypress Creek watershed. But I have focused through the years primarily as chairman of the Greenway Project, working on development of the Cypress Creek Greenway along Cypress Creek. And so post-Harvey, I've gotten probably more into the flooding aspects than I had before. I've always been involved and engaged with the flooding, but the Greenway has been my primary focus since really started in 2004, I guess it was.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And what's the vision for the Greenway Project?
Really, the vision for the Cypress Creek Greenway is to preserve a continuous wooded corridor along Cypress Creek, all the way from where Cypress Creek comes into Harris County out on the Katy Prairie out to the west at the Waller County line, and to preserve that corridor all the way across to where Cypress Creek and Spring Creek come together. Cypress Creek flows into Spring Creek north of the airport, essentially, George Bush Intercontinental Airport. It's over 40 miles. But to preserve that corridor and then work with other entities, as I say, we don't build parks, we don't build trails, but we work as an advocacy group, as a coordinating group, to work with others to create parks along that greenway, within that greenway, and then to ultimately see those parks connected with a all-weather, multi-use trail.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I say, that's kind of the vision. The idea is to have that 40-plus mile greenway all the way from Waller County all the way over to the confluence of Cypress and Spring Creeks.
That'd be nice. And the whole creek is 40 miles long, or is it like 42 or a little longer?
Oh, it's over 40. When if you measure it as the crow flies, but then as you put the meanders in and everything. Yeah. But from Waller County over to where it joins over where the two creeks come together, it's about 40 miles.
And you're talking about going up Little Cypress Creek or Big Cypress or what?
Yeah, our main focus has been on the main corridor, but we also, because of the importance in this area, we're focusing on working up Little Cypress Creek as well, up to about where the Little Cypress Creek Preserve is in that area near the intersection of Cypress Northuse or Spring Cypress and Telge Road. But there's a undeveloped park up there. Fritchie Park is an undeveloped precinct 3 or 4 park, and so that's been kind of a focus area. Eventually, we would like to see it connected further out as Little Cypress as well. But from the very beginning, it's been the entire Cypress Creek main corridor, and then a piece of Little Cypress up to about Fritchie Park.
And then why is that important? Like, people could build houses there. We could, make the whole creek concrete and have this nice straight concrete channel, and people could live there, so why preserve the greenway along there?
Yeah, well, the thing that has been recognized, I think, as we were talking about earlier, it's recognized locally and nationally that the green space does provide a lot of benefits. When I initially got interested in this, my main focus was on quality of life. Again, it's a personal viewpoint, but in general, if you're out in these parks and trails, you see how heavily they're used, that they are something that people value and enjoy.
And let me throw in, there's a lot of scientific evidence, and it's developing more about the importance of nature to our physical and mental well-being.
Yeah. But I was say initially that was kind of quality of life, and then as I got more involved in it, I became more aware of the benefits that it helps with the flooding. That we're developing parks in areas that should really be preserved and not developed because of their proximity to the creek, their propensity for flooding. There's a clear economic benefit done. There was a study that was done along Cypress Creek several years ago, and it was actually funded through the Harris County or Houston-Galveston Area Council was the one that oversaw the study, but they documented that along Cypress Creek, you see a minimum of a 10% appreciation in home and property values if you're close to or adjacent to green space.
And to be green space, it's got to stay green. It can't be green and then change it.
No.
Yeah.
But
then the value will fall.
Benefits. I remember talking to one of the park people years ago, and there was a segment of trail that was completed through that park, and that prompted one of the employees to get out and start walking. And
nice.
That employee lost I don't know how many tens of pounds.
Cool.
He went off his heart medication. He went off his. He was type 2 diabetic. He got rid of that.
Cool.
And so, for the cost of that trail, we probably saved the county money and health benefits for that individual.
Yeah, and that's one thing. If people dig into human health more, ecology, we find that a lot of health problems are not genetic, as some people think or want to think. They're based on lifestyle. So if folks want to look it up, there's a newer field of science called epigenetics, relatively newer in history, not too new, like a year or something, but genetics with an EPI at the beginning. Basically studies how exercise, food, local environment, sunshine, all these other factors influence the way our genes express themselves. Because a lot of times it's not the genes as such that are a problem, but it's how they're expressed. So we need to put ourselves in a healthy habitat, ecology, then we'll be healthy. Get the same person, put them in a different habitat, ecology, and they will be unhealthy. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of anecdotal, but I know for myself.
Well, that's what science is. Science is nothing more than systematic anecdotes,
Yeah.
When you get down to it, like one day I was in the lab and I did this and this, and when you get down to the basic brass tacks, it's like, it's just a matter of how you do the anecdotes. But just like this.
Well, but just if I'm out walking regularly on a daily basis, as opposed to not walking for a couple of weeks or something, I just notice a difference in how I feel, my attitude.
Yeah, me too. Same here.
You tend to think of the physical aspects of losing weight and heart rate and weight loss or whatever, but there's also, I think, a real, at least for me personally, a mental aspect of it as well, that I can go out in a bad mood and come back in a good mood. So I think it very clearly does have a benefit.
And then folks are looking at more science there too.
It's interesting. I've talked to people in this area. I've met young people that have moved into this area, and I asked them. I said, why did you move to Lakewood Forest? And again, it's anecdotal, but Prestonwood, Lakewood Forest, I've run into people that said, we moved here because of the trails.
Cool.
These communities were developed in the 70s and 80s, and I think part of the health of a community is to have continuing young families coming in, and if we can provide amenities that make this area more attractive to them, it's very beneficial to the community. And then I've also talked to retired folks that said, well, we were actually thinking about going somewhere else, but we have time, we enjoy the trails, we've got hospitals, we've got stores close to the airport. I've got no desire to go anywhere else, so we're going to stay in the area. So I think it touches across the spectrum of people, regardless of age, that the trails and parks really do have a lot of appeal to a large segment of the population.
Yeah, like a friend of mine, Matt, he used to live in the area, lived in Cypress, and he moved to a different part of town, but he knows from his own experience around town, talking to people and all that, there's nowhere else in town like Cypress Creek, the access to the trails and the woods, and it's kind of rare in any city that you find that also, any city around the U.S.
Yeah, I think, when you look at Houston overall, we were involved several years ago through the Greater Houston Partnership. They have a committee called the Quality of Life Committee, and we were involved with that. And it was really through that Quality of Life Committee the concept came out about the greenways, Bayou greenways in the Houston area. And there were 10 waterways that were identified as part of the Bayou Greenway Initiative, and Spring Creek to the north, and Cypress and White Oak, and all the way on down to Clear Creek, those 10 waterways. And so initially the Bayou Greenway Initiative was all those waterways, and then the city actually had a bond issue they passed several years ago, and it did not include Spring Creek except for a small piece over near Kingwood, and included none of Cypress Creek. But the Bayou Greenways 2020 program is focusing on those greenways, 150 miles of greenways just within the city. But then when you look at Spring Creek and Cypress Creek, in addition to those, I don't think there's probably another metropolitan area in the country that has the potential that Houston does for an interconnected system of greenways, along our waterways. And now the Houston Parks Board is also looking at, well, what do we do after the Bayou Greenways 2020 is completed? And they're looking at north-south connectivity, between these. Most of the streams run west to east, and so we need the connectivity north to south between these. And so, that effort's underway as well out into the future. So the greater Houston area just has an incredible opportunity, I think, and is pursuing that opportunity to develop these greenways.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, and then to throw in really quickly before we move beyond it, you talked about how some home values are increased by 10% by being close to the greenway, but property values. But folks can look it up. It's other research all around the country. Values are increased when there's forest or green space nearby.
Yes.
A lot of research on that.
Yeah.
But so what have been some of the challenges that the Greenway Project has had, and things you've had to overcome, and successes you've had?
Yeah, I think the challenges have been to convince or work with some entities to convince them that greenways are beneficial and a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've spoken to probably over 100 groups through the years, and these are MUDs, HOAs, developers, whomever. And the two most frequent things that come up, particularly with the MUDs, one is... And
really quickly, just in case some people don't know, what's a MUD?
A MUD is a municipal utility district. When development is done in the greater Houston area, a MUD is developed, and the MUD is developed to actually build and maintain the water and sewer system.
Mm-hmm.
And so the MUDs are created, and they provide water, they provide sewer service to the communities. But the MUDs can build parks and trails as well. You look at the legislature, the wording for the MUDs, they're actually charged with providing amenities for the residents. But the MUDs can build parks and trails, and many do. But in talking to people, the two most common things that come up about trails and parks is, one is the cost, and they should be looking at that. I mean, they're stewards of their finances, and they need to be looking at that. But it's a plus for the community.
Then
so the cost is there for the construction and the maintenance, and then the other thing that comes up is the issue, and this frequently comes up from a lot of residents, is safety. I mean, people have this perception if you put trails in, the only people who are going to be using them are people that want to do you harm. That's simply not the case.
Hunker down inside your house.
I don't know. You don't see somebody carrying a 40-inch flat screen down a trail. But when you look at the communities that are being built today, and this is true across the country, but I mean, you look at Kingwood, you look at the Woodlands, you look at Bridgeland, you look at any of these large and smaller communities, Town Lake, any of them, what are they promoting? They're promoting their parks and trails.
Mm-hmm.
And so along Cypress Creek, what we're actually trying to do is to really retrofit through this corridor, because the community is there, but we didn't have parks and trails as a prime amenity when these areas were being built. And so it is a challenge to answer the questions about safety and answer the questions about the cost. There are a number of ways that MUDs can raise funds. They can take funds out of their general funds. They can pass bond issues. There have been over $25 million in bond issues passed by MUDs along Cypress Creek just for parks and trails. Also, there are grants available through Texas Parks and Wildlife and other entities that you can get matching grants to build parks and build trails and even purchase land. So, there are ways that they can do that. Then a number of MUDs have the sales tax benefit that they have an agreement with the city of Houston that within that MUD district there's an additional 1% sales tax added, and the MUD gets 0.5% and the city gets 0.5%. And so some MUDs are able to do things because they have that revenue coming in from that. So there are ways to finance it if they want to. But you ask about the challenges.
And one thing, and for folks, like a lot of people know what an HOA is, but make sure everybody knows, what's an HOA?
Yeah, a homeowners association. These are civic organizations, and the thing that what we find is that HOAs generally don't have the financial capability of doing too much in the way of parks and trails. Their budgets are much smaller than the MUDs are. MUDs will frequently have multi-million-dollar budgets, where homeowners association frequently, some are larger, but some are in the tens of thousands of dollars. But when you talk about building trails and things like that, the MUDs are much more capable of doing that than are the HOAs. But the HOAs can support it. If the HOAs want to see this, that's something they can be a voice to the MUDs.
And HOA is private, and a MUD is governmental?
Well, it's quasi-government, I guess.
Quasi-government, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, they're elected. They've certainly got very tight regulations on what they can and can't do, and financial responsibility and things like that. But the HOAs also have government regulations that they have to abide by as well. But it's just the question of scale. The MUDs are, when you're dealing with water systems and sanitary systems, the amount of money that you're dealing with is much more.
Okay, cool. So back to what you were saying.
As I say, the challenges in some MUDs, I've met with MUDs that, they said, well, we do water and sewer, we don't want anything to do with it. And then there are other MUDs that have done incredible things. Timberlane Utility District is on the east side of 45. And they've developed 4 parks along Cypress Creek. They've built miles of trails. They're building a community center right now. They've built a pedestrian bridge across Cypress Creek. And then there are some MUDs that don't want to do anything. And so it varies. And we have seen the makeup on MUD boards change over the years sometimes. People that really do want to do something, decide to run for the MUD board, and sometimes open up to their eyes to opportunities that can really help their community.
So that's the way people can get involved. Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I think it's one thing. I think MUDs are starting to realize too that if you have communities that have parks and trails, people are going to look more favorably at those communities as to where they want to live. Yeah,
people care more. They're more involved. It's safer and better, and you don't got to worry about people carrying 44-inch TVs on the trail.
But when you have trails that are sanctioned trails, they're patrolled. Precinct 4 has a parks department in the constables. There's constables or park constables, and they work with the HOAs. In some cases, the HOAs actually, or the MUDs actually, hire them to patrol areas, or in the public parks like around Meyer Park and Collins Park, Kickerilla Mission Preserve, Cypress Park, and others, the constables patrol those areas.
Yeah, a lot. It's good. And then if folks are worried, like, the more people that get out and use the trails, well, the more eyes there are and the safer it's going to be.
Yep.
A criminal doesn't want, like, 10 people a minute walking by a certain place. But
they don't want to go where they're seen frequently.
And then one place where they're not seen the most is when they're indoors. It's like when you're outdoors, you can be seen, I'd rather be outdoors than, like, you don't have a home break-in outdoors. It's like indoors.
Yeah. But I think there's a good relationship between Precinct 4 constables and they patrol actually both Precinct 4, Commissioner Cagle's parks and trails, and they also patrol the parks and trails that Commissioner Raddick has. We essentially go to, Precinct 4 constables go all the way down to about 290. But the Precinct 4 commissioners, both Cagle and Raddick, have been very, very supportive of efforts to develop parks and trails along Cypress Creek.
Cool.
It's been, that's one change that we've seen, through the years, as money has been available. They've not only developed parks and trails, but then they've also developed programming to go along with what's available at the parks, like
at Kickerillo.
Right?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Our Kleb's not quite on the creek, but
yeah, Kleb Woods. Yeah,
nice park.
Yes.
Cool. Then I think education's a big issue. Just knowing the importance of the outdoors, the greenery, economic benefits, importance of exercising out there instead of in a gym. We need gyms too. Gyms are good. Help you focus on certain things, but for complete human movement, more complexity, more full range of motion for our joints, everything, more connecting. You go to the gym and you can do a bicep curl and be totally mindless and tune out, but when you're outdoors, you're going to want to be more aware and alert of your environment, your surroundings. You're moving yourself, so it's a lot more fulfilling experience.
Yeah, and the range of views you get, people out, walking and running as individuals, running clubs, as you mentioned earlier, individual runners, a lot of cyclists, mountain biking or off-road biking is really popular in this area, and we work closely with GORBA, Greater Houston Off-Road Biking Association, trying to coordinate our efforts and work to preserve tracks, and GORBA folks will help maintain the trails. They have trail stewards. So it's really a lot of use of the area. That one thing that has exceeded my expectations is Commissioner Cagle and Precinct 4 has the Trails as Parks program, and they put canoes on the creeks and on the lake at Kickerillo Misher to get people outside with that. It's really multifaceted opportunities out there to enjoy things along Cypress Creek and in the parks.
Yeah. And now your Greenway Project, that's all like voluntary, kind of volunteer kind of thing, right?
Yeah, as I say, our committee is a really very small effort, or a small committee, so to speak, because so much of what we do is actually try to make the connections between the appropriate parties to create trails or parks. We don't do programming. We don't really hold events or things like that. We just don't have the staffing or the time, really, to focus. Our main focus has been on trying to create the Greenway through connections with, there are over 60 MUDs that border Cypress Creek, and half a dozen developers and two different precincts, Precinct 3 and 4. So there's just a lot of entities to try to coordinate and work with to make sure the connections are being made. A lot of the entities tend to work independently from one another. And so where we can make connections, that's something that we really work hard to do, is to try to leverage off where we can see folks working together. Something that we did, for instance, in the Cypress Creek 249 area several years ago, we approached Lake Forest Utility District, which is the utility district for Lakewood Forest, and took to them the concept of creating a trail master plan for the Cypress Creek 249 area. Because we have the heart of the Cypress Creek corridor right through this area. We have 249, we have Lone Star College, the HP campus, Chasewood Technology Park, the Vintage, the YMCA, just a lot right down in that area, right at 249 and Cypress Creek. But the idea was to build upon the kind of various pieces that had been done. There are all these little trail pieces that are it's about a 13 or 14 square mile area there that are all independent and not connected. And so we pulled together several entities and got funding together to hire a landscape architect to do a master plan for that area. And it does show the potential that there is for the connectivity, not only at that nucleus, but along the creek and then out into the surrounding community. And so we're encouraged with what we're seeing happening as a result of that master plan. I think that's made a lot of folks realize just the potential that we have in the area. And so various pieces of that master plan have come to fruition and continue to come to fruition. So,
and that's available for people to look at on your website?
Yeah, if you go to the ccfcc.org website, the master plan is right there. There's a link to the master plan right on the opening page of the website.
Yeah, cool. I'll put that in the show notes so people can check it out.
Yeah, no, and it was a real challenge to get these entities to come together to do the master plan. I'm not aware of any other efforts like that in the Houston area to do something like that.
Cool.
But
thanks.
It's worked out really well. And I might mention along Cypress Creek, we essentially started our efforts in 2004. But since 2004, there have been 26 parks. A couple of them are still under construction, but either completed or under construction that will connect or are connected or will connect to the Cypress Creek Greenway.
And that's, you think, directly or indirectly through your influence?
Some of those are. We don't
Cool.
by any way claim that we caused all of them.
Yeah.
But there are.
We're in control.
There are some that we did cause to happen, and then. Good. Also, though, I think the thing it shows, the fact that people are building these parks and trails within the corridor shows that, even though we may not have encouraged it or got them started on it, they realize the benefit to it. And so, 26 parks in 15 years is not too bad. So.
Connectivity thing's important. Looking at things in isolation is not good for anything. Health, exercise, diet, lifestyle,
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right there. And one of the things that we saw, though, is, even the connectivity and the potential we saw from the 249 Cypress Creek area trail master plan is until the Kickarilla Mission Preserve was open, that has served as a catalyst because people see what it's like. They see the benefits of connecting to it. But for years we talked about, there's going to be a preserve or there's going to be a park there. And, when the park was finally open, people could finally see what Precinct 4 was doing and, what a wonderful amenity is. And so having it there has been a boost to us. Harvey hurt us, though. That slowed down progress because the number of the entities to which we had reached out with which we were working were flooded. And, trails the last thing they were thinking about, which I fully understand when they're dealing with the impacts of flooding on their business. And so we're kind of past most of that now. So we're gearing up again in some of those areas.
Cool. How many people are on the Greenway Project?
Oh, just a couple. As far as our efforts on the coalition, I'm the primary one. But then, when you start thinking about the folks that in Precinct 3 that are doing things, and the Precinct 4 are doing things independently, and and then the MUDs and everything, there's lots and lots of folks that are working on it. But at least as far as our advocacy coordinating visioning group, it's a very small effort. staffing wise.
So if some folks are interested, and they could really make a contribution and not just get in the way, they'd be good if they contact you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to talk to anybody. As I say, a lot of what I do is to make connections and talk to various organizations about what's happening and what the vision is and what is underway. But one of the things that I think, people say, well, what can I do? Well, depending on where you live, if you're connected or not connected, that makes a difference. If you are connected and your mud is involved with the Greenway, I really encourage people to let their mud know that they appreciate it.
Yeah,
if
good
they're
point.
not involved and not connected, on the other hand, they say, well, I'd encourage you to go to your mud and ask why we're not looking at this, or why aren't you considering this? And people can be a local advocate for it. And I come in from the outside and say, I'm here and I want you to spend a bunch of money, and I don't live here. But when mud boards hear from their constituents that they have interest in things like this, that does make a difference.
Yeah, we got enough.
Same with Commissioners Raddick and Cagle. It's incredible what they're doing. Commissioner Raddick has built 4 parks along Cypress Creek. Cypress Park, East Shadow Lake Park, and there's a park right across from Maxwell Park, right across from Cypress Park, and then he's building Grantwood right at Cypress Creek and Grant Road, and then Commissioner Cagle, Kickrilla Mission Preserve, and has built trails along Cypress Creek, has acquired tracks. So both commissioners are doing a tremendous amount of work with Cypress Creek Greenway, which will eventually be, as that eventually gets connected. But, just letting the commissioners know that you appreciate what they're doing is important. I think people tend to complain to their MUDs or complain to the commissioners when things aren't going well. But if they're doing things you like, I encourage people to let them know that you do appreciate it and support it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then through human history, we got enough social pressure to do bad things. We need to, social pressure is just a part of being human, but we need to get that social pressure and apply it to doing some good. And then, as you say, showing gratitude is important. Just like on old places long ago, or if you go to country roads, it's different than the city. It's kind of nice. Like you drive down some road and you go by someone you don't even know in their car, or someone on the front porch, and what do people do? They wave to each other. So just kind of do that same thing in principle. Emphasize the good, reward it, show some gratitude, say thanks, and encourage more that stuff to go on.
Yeah.
What about the Flood Control Coalition? How many people are on that? Is that bigger?
Yeah, we've got a board of I think currently we've got 8 on our board right now. Got a couple empty slots.
And that's voluntary, kind of private, or is that government?
No,
governmental?
It's volunteer. It's a nonprofit organization.
Okay.
All volunteer staff. We meet the third Wednesday of every month at 6:30 in the Lake Forest Utility District office, and anybody's welcome to come to the meeting.
Cool.
But
just go and say thank you.
I'm sorry?
Go and say thank you.
Yeah, well, or get involved. As they say, there are a number of things that we try to do. As they were
send a Barbara's Quartet to sing for them.
Yeah, we're all volunteers, and to get people involved in the flooding. It's as I say, the coalition started in '99. I got involved with it in 2004, but folks work incredibly hard to try to mitigate flooding issues in Cypress Creek, and I think have been a very good, very effective voice for the community on the flooding things. And as I say, the Greenway is just a small part of what we do in the coalition, but we work closely with Harris County Flood Control, work with MUDs, work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and we kind of work. I don't want to say behind the scenes necessarily, but working with these entities to try to cause what we think are the right things to happen. We hire consultants to do engineering studies and then share those results with the appropriate bodies to support or point out where we think there may be gaps. It's unfortunate, but I say that this group has been going on essentially 20 years, but it's really only post-Harvey that flooding seems to have really gotten most people's attention, sadly.
Yeah.
It took Harvey to do that. There was
Makes sense.
more interest after tax day, but Harvey was really the thing that got a lot more people interested in addressing the flooding issues, but that's something we've been advocating for many years.
Have you noticed, do you remember in your own experience through the decades or talking to other people who've lived here longer, how flooding has changed? Is there always been some flooding every few years or 5 or 10 years, kind of same amount? Before Harvey, there were, a number of episodes of flooding. Not as much as Harvey, but still some flooding in the area. But has it been something that's always occurred through the decades?
Yeah, well, I think there's certainly strong evidence and just an observation that the flooding events seem to be more frequent and stronger than what they have been in the past. But I think you also need to recognize we've got 40 or 50 years of good history out in this area. Well, maybe more than that to some degree, but it's really just in the last 30, 40 years this area's really started to develop. But the flooding's always occurred out here in the past. But it does seem to be worse. I think probably at least in part because of increased rainfall. Development like these had, an effect on it as well. But when we've had the tax day event and Memorial Day and Harvey and all these other ones, and 94 and 98 were really bad ones, but there were several other ones in there between. It's no doubt probably worse than it used to be. But then the other thing is we've pushed in close to the creek where I don't think we really should have.
Agreed.
I see development occurring today, unfortunately, in areas I don't think should be occurring.
Yeah, right. It's just going to flood. It's just going to be like, what's the point? What are you thinking?
What are you thinking? And even if the areas are built, and they say, well, we've elevated high enough, it's not going to flood. But then, okay, but you're not going to be able to get in or out of your subdivision or your complex because the roads are going to be underwater because Cypress Creek floods.
Right.
And that's not regulated, unfortunately. But the folks that are doing that know that the residents are going to be stranded or trapped outside their development for a while when the local roads go underwater.
Yeah, so they're not going to live there. Other people will, so who cares?
Yeah. No, it's unfortunate that some of these areas, which they can be developed legally, but they just shouldn't be.
Not smart ecologically, not smart for the emergency situation.
Yeah, and then you end up putting other people at risk.
Right.
You had several hundred residents stranded in an apartment complex, and my gosh, if it caught on fire or something like that, or health issues or things like that, then you put responders at risk to try to expect them to go in and help the folks that are stranded. So it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and it kind of takes advantage of some people's benevolence, because if you're stranded, no one's going to say, well, we're not going to help you. Of course, people are going to want to help you because that's what people do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then, it'd be nice if there was more land around there to really nature to soak it up, absorb it. Or maybe if we get more advanced too, something they could do to kind of simulate the land would be to have some of that permeable concrete that I think some people have invented, have more stuff that soaks up the moisture as the land naturally does, instead of shedding it off and causing more drainage and hence more flooding.
Well, runoff, there's low impact development methods, and they're being used more and more widely in the area. But I also see developments that are occurring out here. They're not, that's not even on the radar. So again, you kind of see the whole spectrum on that.
Yeah, and That occurred to me when you were talking about some of the flooding over a long period of time. I've seen recently, read some stuff about how when some freed people came over from Alabama, Mississippi, came over to the Cypress area. I think they were staying along Falky Gully. And I've read that they'd have to move sometimes when there'd be flooding along the gully and the creek. And, this is back late 1800s. So.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. No, there's a lot of history in this area. I'm just kind of scratching the surface what I know, but bits and pieces I've seen through the years. There's a lot of history right in this area. Like you mentioned, Falky Gully, there's a black cemetery that is right along Falky Gully that there are some folks that are looking at and trying to do something to see that it's
great.
better preserved. And
awesome.
Sadly, I'm aware of a couple cemeteries out here that I've seen them on maps, but they're now developed, and I don't know how they were. I don't know the history of those cemeteries, but there's a couple cemeteries in the area that I think development just went right on top of, unfortunately.
Yeah, because some of that's like good, should be like preserved historically.
Yeah.
If nothing else, develop around it.
Yeah, but there are a number of family cemeteries out in this area around us where we live here now. There's one near Longwood and one off Kluge Road, and these are old family cemeteries that are still in existence, and they fortunately have been preserved.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other ones that have been lost, sadly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of interesting information that's available on the internet if you go look for it. And I posted some of that on the Cypress Creek Ecological Restoration Project, CCERP Facebook page. Some of that. I'd like to have some folks on in the future to talk to them about that information, learn more about the history of the area.
Yeah.
But have that in future podcasts. But cool. But and I think with Harvey, that's such an unusual situation.
Yeah, it is.
It's it would have been bad flooding with development or not. It's like so much rain. It's like, geez.
Yeah. Harvey is just off the charts. But, tax day flood is something that, something on that order of magnitude. When you think about dealing with flooding, you need to think about more events like that than Harvey. I really think. But it's, I know people don't realize how fast Cypress Creek can change either, because I actually went to one of the flood events. I can't even remember which it was, but I went back to the hydrologic data, which is online, and essentially a minute by minute history of what the water levels are in tabular form. And there's one place on Grant Road at Cypress Creek. The creek went up 13 feet in just over an hour.
Wow, interesting.
And through Bayou Preservation Association, we've worked with them. We're working to develop a paddling trail on Cypress Creek, and I see people out on the creek in its flood stage, and that's terrible. I mean, it's really not a smart thing to do at all when it's out there at that flood stage. To be out there on a kayak or even a wave runner. I've seen people out on Cypress Creek in wave runners.
Why would you not recommend that? What are some of the dangers?
Just the hazards with the high water, and you get higher velocity flow, and that's when you flip over, you get trapped underwater, and you can't get out. Generally, in flood stage is a bad time to be on the water. Mainly because of the snags and hazards, and that's an easy time to drown.
Stuff that snags that you really can't see.
Yeah, you get or you get tangled up in a snag, and then it sucks you underwater, and even if you're wearing a life preserver, you can't get out. Or then also the water gets up close to the bridges, and you get swept under a bridge.
Oh yeah, wow. Yeah, actually can be pretty strong. It's like, I know I had a situation like that when I was younger on a river in Colorado or something, where on a river, and we're going down in some boat, like some family, my brother, my dad, I, two guides, and hey, way up ahead, look, there's a tree in the river. Okay, let's start paddling. Hey, it's getting closer. Paddle faster. Hey, it's getting closer. And all of a sudden, literally, bam, we hit the tree. Raft flips. Everything comes out. We're hanging onto the tree for dear life,
Yeah.
It can go from like, it's okay, work to disaster in like before you know it.
Yeah. Well, Cypress Creek at its normal levels is a nice paddle, and if it's up a few inches, that can help you through some of the shallower areas. But it's a beautiful stretch of creek to paddle. But you don't want to be out there if there's a threat of high water, or be on it when the water's up. It's not worth it. It's just too risky.
Yeah, and then if the water's high, I guess it's a little more okay, a little cleaner. But in some flood situations, then you have really more pollution in the water. Better to avoid it. Whoops.
I don't know if you can hear me or
there,
not.
okay, yeah, we're back. That didn't last too long. Good.
Okay. But, you said water is higher, it's cleaner. Well, actually, Cypress Creek is an impaired creek in the sense the E. coli, which is the fecal bacteria levels, are higher than they are for acceptable use of the water for contact recreation. And Cypress Creek is higher than what the recommended levels are for contact recreation, but it's a lot cleaner than many of the waterways in the greater Houston area. But actually,
wow, that's too bad.
When the water level goes up with increased rainfall, you think, well, that probably dilutes it. It actually makes it worse.
Yeah, more dog stuff in the yard.
It's all the fecal material from animals, farm animals, pets. I don't know if you're aware of it. There is an effort underway right now to improve the water quality in Cypress Creek Watershed, but it's estimated that 80% of the fecal material in Cypress Creek comes from pets.
Yeah,
primarily dogs.
Right.
And people not picking up after their dogs, and so it's actually, when the water is higher, it's actually dirtier from fecal material.
Makes sense, yeah. Then maybe no rain, some stuff's been sitting there collecting, and then all of a sudden rain and more of this feces washes off into the street and then down. Yeah, right. Yeah. Makes sense. But, well, I don't want to keep it too much longer. We've been going for a while, but you got any other last words for folks? Or?
Well, I guess the thing, just a couple points. One, as I said earlier, I think so much of what we do in this area is balance, whether it's development, non-development, or preservation. But then when we have the tracts preserved, we work toward a balanced approach with that, is that, if we can preserve 40 acres, that 40 acres of forested area can be not only wildlife habitat, but it can be refuge. Mm-hmm. Refuge means where wildlife can go and not be disturbed. And so
we need it.
The approach that we take is, we'll have a trail across that and maybe some natural surface trails in that tract, but in no way, shape, or form do we think there should be a whole network of trails covering the entire tract. Because you not only destroy the habitat, but more importantly, you destroy the refuge. The deer and other animals don't have some place they can go and even lie down during the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the balance is really important on that. So that's one of the things that we strive, working with other trail users, Gorba and others, to try to make people realize that we've got a wonderful thing out here, but if we overuse it, we can destroy what we have.
Yeah, right.
And so that balance is something we work toward. And then also, I know your efforts with your with your podcast and others, talking about trash in the area, and you've been one that I'm pleased to see that's worked to do that. That's something I've done for many years.
Thanks. I was going to say,
I walked the trails for years, and then used to get irritated with trash and start carrying a grocery bag and realized that wasn't big enough. And then I got a trash grabber and a larger bag. And whenever I walk the trails, I always pick up trash. And through the years, though, I think through your efforts and others, and then also, I think when there's less trash, people are less likely to throw it out there.
True. Yeah.
And so, I think in this 249 area. To Grant Road and up and down the creek through this area, there is a lot less trash than what we've had in the past, because one, people pick it up, and then I think people are less likely to throw it down. But it is disappointing to see that a lot of the trash is water bottles, energy drink bottles and power bar wrappers, things like that. So, it's the trail users in many cases that are ones that are trashing the trail.
Yeah.
And so, I just encourage people, to use the area to think about that. And I think it'd even be great every time somebody went out, if they see a water bottle or something, just pick up one piece of trash, pick one thing up. If all the users did that, we'd see a lot less as well. And
and it's good practice on mobility. People want to go to yoga and pay for it, or pay for a gym, or pay for a trainer. Well, just squat and pick up a piece of trash and bend down in different ways. Like keep your back straight, think of good posture. And you're, working on mobility. Think about
flexibility.
Like squat down close to it, but not too much. So you got to stretch your arm a little bit and reach and pull out the muscle and feel it and grab it and then pick it up and think about your posture and be mindful of your alignment. Stand up and walk on. Carry a little bag. Because there's more people out there that care about the trail than want to trash it, I think. So if people who cared about it would take care of it, then we'd be better off. And I think that's another thing about picking up trash. The more people see some people picking up trash, then the others will get encouraged to do it too and want to.
Yep. I've never heard anybody say, I just really like that trail, or I really like that park, because there's just so much.
Amen, right? Or concrete.
Or concrete.
I feel so good with all this concrete around. I feel so good with all this trash, right? True. But cool. Good. So, thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mike.
Thanks for your time. Awesome.
You're welcome.
So, have a good time outdoors when it is nice again, when we don't got the rain. And thanks for picking up the trash and working on the Greenway. And, you're one of the ones that's made possible what we have to enjoy out there. So, thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you. And see you on the trails.
All right. Awesome. Look forward to it.
All right. Take care.